Tonight, we've got 4 artists from Southern California, all different parts of Southern California. Daniel Gibson.
Hello.
Robin Eisenberg.
Hi.
Albert Reyes.
Hello.
And Sage Vaughn. I'm kind of curious how all of you perhaps became connected to skateboarding in any way, even if that means skateboarding all the time, or if that just means it was something that was on the periphery that you guys kind of were interested in. Daniel, go ahead. Sorry.
I grew up on skateboarding, and skateboarding was my first love. It was I didn't know that I was gonna pursue art. I didn't know anything because I grew up in a town like in the desert, so there's no art programs or there's nothing like that. So skateboarding was like skateboarding and being in a band and trying to play music was my outlet. And I actually I didn't get into painting or art until 21, and I lied to this girl because she said she was like, "What do you like to do?" And I was like, "I drink beer and skateboard." Don't say that. And I just told her. She said she was a painter, and so I said I was a painter too. But I didn't feel like I was lying too much because I already had I thought I used to draw on my skateboards. I always thought skateboarding was artistic. And if you're skateboarding, you're usually playing in a band or playing music or into music, and so I would want to be in a band just so I could make the flyers, so I can make the T-shirts, so I can make all the graphics and stuff like that. So I didn't really feel like I was lying too much, but it worked.
For me, I pretty much growing up, I would spend a lot of time sitting at skate parks. I always loved watching people skate, and I did try to skate a lot, but I was pretty awful at it. But I didn't really care. I just felt really inspired being around it. I think it's amazing that so many people are connected together doing something, even if they all come from totally different places. People make mistakes, they fall, they get up, they do things again, and I think I just always found that to be super inspirational for my art, and I would draw skateboarders all the time. I think I would try to live vicariously through them, essentially. And Thrasher, I did an image with a Thrasher shirt on it, and they ended up seeing it, and so they kind of reached out and asked if I would want to do a T-shirt with them, which is super rad. So I got kind of connected through that, and then it just went from there. I feel really excited that I got to be a part of something that I always admired so much. So it's cool.
I just like skateboarding as a youngster because it's like a loner sport too. It's the same as painting. It's like a loner sport. You're by yourself, and then you kind of get to create your own lines, create your own path through the street.
I grew up in the valley. You had to skateboard because I don't know. It was I couldn't ride a bike. I can't remember when I first started skateboarding. It's just always been a part of my life. I've never been good at it, but it's always been a part of my life.
All of you, in your own ways, basically just talked about this community aspect of it. And now that skateboarding in 2019 is kind of part of the contemporary lexicon, it's so big. It's a sport that people probably participate in more than most American sports. But I do think there's that kind of crew mentality with your friends, no matter if you didn't skate or not, because I didn't skate either, but I was always around my friends that skated. It was part of our we're fucking around kind of activity. Pardon, I shouldn't have said that, sorry. But I think talking about a little bit of that team camaraderie part of skateboarding and that kind of crew mentality, that's the way that you kind of made friends. Not even if you were an outcast, but this is kind of how you made friends. Maybe I'm aging myself a little bit, but I think it plays out today too.
I lived out in a factory town, and when I moved to El Centro, California, that was the first time I saw just gang members, and I didn't want to join a gang because I didn't really see what they were doing, that was appealing to me. Just because they were just kicking it on a wall and drinking beer, I was like, I'd rather drink beer and skate, or I'd rather just be with these dudes because you guys aren't doing too much. What I loved about skateboarding is that we kind of accepted everybody. It didn't matter if you're like a rich kid or you're like a super poor kid, we'd give you boards, or like we'd always like help each other out. And
you watch your friends do tricks over and over again, and it's so like, why are you doing this? But it's like there's like this kind of, and your friend's filming it. You're like, why are you guys doing this? But it's like there's this kind
Nobody's filming it.
Yeah. Well, okay, now it is.
not in the 90s.
Yeah.
Everybody's filming it today.
Yeah, right.
Kids are so amazing today.
Yeah, I was already like a band, and I didn't really like all my friends did graffiti and started doing graffiti because they were trying to outlaw skateboarding in our town, and so they were just like, we're just gonna go destroy more shit.
Yeah.
Because if we can't skate, we might as well just start like drawing.
And those were the connections start happening, right? Like
Yeah.
the real, like the tentacles of skateboarding getting into kind of art, like really start kind of playing out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that that's the thing that skateboarding and art and music also, a lot of things have in common, where people are like, they can't help but do it, and you all are sharing that feeling of like, I don't have a choice, like I have to do this, like I need to do it.
Right.
And I think like it does kind of bring all different people together. I mean, that's a cool thing that VANS does too, is like they combine all those worlds and bring them together, and I think people relate across them because they all feel that same impulse of like, I can't not do this, like it's at the core of my being and I have to do it. I have that with art. I don't have it with skating because I used to love to try to skate, but it was hard. But yeah, I did a little bit. I got in trouble.
The Venice scene was gritty, and I mean, I don't think until like Dogtown and Z-Boys came out, it kind of was like didn't really get across to people.
I think when you just kind of grow up like that, like you're just kind of making up your own rules as it goes along.
Well, and I think too, like you're talking a little bit about access points. Like most kids don't grow up going to like Gagosian Gallery as like that's like their typical Saturday. Like there's very rare people get to have that experience. So I think it's skateboarding in particular was an access point to. What are you giggling about over there? It's like an access point that is.
It's a gateway drug.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Gateway drug.
For me, I think like skating and painting and the arts, like skating is an art form, painting is an art form. And these are the things you can find, the only thing, really some of the few things you can find true freedom. The freedom to express who you are as a person and your inner soul to like release, to fly, to express yourself. And, skateboarding does that, painting does that.
Yeah, I mean, that was the same for me. Like with art, when I was a kid, in high school at least, like I was pretty nerdy. I was like really into Star Trek. And then like finding art just sort of created like a community of people that I think suddenly like I was accidentally doing something that people kind of thought was cool and I didn't really realize it. And then I was like, oh wow, like people relate to this. And this is a way to connect to people that I would not normally ever connect with. And I think that that's continued on today. Like I feel like you just end up connecting, especially, I mean, today is weird because with social media, you're able to connect with a lot of people that you would never normally reach. And I feel like all these things we're talking about are doing that, and people are reaching audiences and like other people who are also feeling isolated. And I think, even though I think the internet is weird and can be awful, it can also end up bringing things together in a really cool way and bringing those people out of isolation.
Okay, now that it is so popular, like what is where's that kind of like rebellious? I mean, it'll always be rebellious, especially the Thrasher version of it. But like, is there a little bit like have we lost anything about that original sort of rebellious kind of? I'm with my crew of friends and I'm skateboarding and it feels like it's not part of the X Games.
I think, not to get too like macro on this, but I do feel like a lot of the gatekeepers and a lot of these things have like checked the fuck out. You know what I mean? But skating. You can't fake it. You know what I mean? You can't you can buy the board and buy the shoes and, whatever and like go and like rub a fake ollie hole on the side of your shoes and show up. But like when it comes down to it, like if you can't skate, you can't skate.
In the 70s, there were still those people trying to do those tricks it's the same kind of like, it gets passed down, which I think is kind of a unique about skateboarding is that, and it's different than the camaraderie of artists. Because even though it does get passed down, there's a competitiveness to art that is so inherent in the survival of an artist. Sure, there's groups of artists and there's movements, but there's a competitiveness that in skateboarding it feels like there's a competitiveness, but it feels a little bit more
optional.
Yeah, exactly.
You're competing with yourself, though.
Yeah. Are there? personal experiences with either Vans or just in skate culture that you've kind of carried with you for all these years?
I got a story.
Yeah, give it to
Okay, so when I was a kid, I had a good friend. His name was Matthew Beavers, and he had an older sister, and she dated someone who worked with Vans. And then that guy was really cool. He would hook us up with all the stickers, you know, like that red sticker with the thumbs up and the skateboard, and he'd bring us stacks of stickers. And sometimes he'd give us shoes, and we would just be like, what are these? These are different, you know? There's no strings, you know, the slip-ons and stuff. And then we went to a store, and he's like, yeah, you can draw like on this little side thing, and they'll attach it to the shoe. And we're like, what the hell? You know?
You can customize it?
Yeah, you can
I didn't even
customize
think
them.
about like that customizing culture of all of it too.
Yeah.
That's something that that is basketball players. Yeah, they might put like a little number on their shoes, but they don't like customize them the way that skateboarders customize their stuff.
They were like poor kid shoes. Like they weren't like,
Yeah.
they weren't baller shoes. That's why I had them, because I could afford them, and I didn't look like a lop. You know what I mean? Like I was like, oh, I look kind of cool. And like, the thing that's crazy is that like this shoe still exists.
Well, I like the transition when like kids, like if you showed up at school and you had you had a particular basketball shoe that was very hot at the time, like people were like, oh, that guy's got that's what their parents bought. But if you wore Vans, it was kind of like, oh, it's kind of the kid's a skater. Like it was like a very very particular like branding exercise of oneself that at the time you don't really recognize because you're just who you are and you're just trying to get through it. But there's something about Again, we get back to the tribal thing. Like it's just kind of this group mentality that is so unique to skateboarding and a particular version of art within that skateboarding scene.
And I mean, on a slightly different note too, I feel like Vans were pretty awesome because that was like a shoe that you could essentially create your own art and walk around with it. You know what I mean? Because you could take the slip-ons, you could draw over them, you could and I don't feel like it was easy to do that with a lot of other things. And I remember seeing people with like these really epic art pieces on their shoes, and it was just really amazing. Like I feel like that's kind of awesome that you can like just connect that together.
Documentation is so important to this scene, and it is to graffiti as well, but skateboarding in particular too. It's just the still images and the stories that were told. Do you guys have any sort of personal kind of stories that you guys like that from this time that really it still sticks with you?
I think like the fact that anyone could turn whatever that was into anything eloquent, like even someone being like sober enough to take a picture to like, you know what I mean? Like it's incredible.
Right.
Like it's
But it's essential too.
There was no formula then.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about this with the Gone show up in San Francisco. Like there was no formula for like skate artist. Like that's a thing now. Like you can be like, if you're a skater, like your backup plan's being an artist sometimes. You know what I mean? Like if like you blow out your knees. Like there's like a formula now that a lot of those dudes like blaze that trail with no net.
Right, and it seems so common in 2019, but then like, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it's like what are these guys doing? Yeah, right.
Skateboarding attracts creative people, and then creative people wear Vans, and then we're all here together.
That's so good.
Blow it bye-bye.
This is your TED Talk.
I thought I was going to have to say that at the end, but you did.
I have a question that's not necessarily about skateboarding, but just about art in general. Like, what do you find influences you now, like today, every day, in your art?
I just think of art as just a practice, just like a doctor practices medicine. Like I just practice art, so I'm constantly trying to like figure out new ideas and figure out new ways to draw things. I like to like go into my head a lot to make work. So I do need to go to like the beach and go hiking and do all these beautiful. But I'm usually in the studio a lot because I probably work too much. I don't know. I think it's just life, man.
It's definitely like it helps to just make yourself kind of uncomfortable. Like I feel like we all get too easily comfortable, and you can find something that works, and then you just kind of settle into it, and then before you know it, you're like bored by your own work, you know? So I think it's good to just be uncomfortable, like do stuff that makes you feel weird or makes you feel kind of outside of what you're used to, and you end up making something unexpected, which I think helps to then launch like the next thing that you're like, oh, now I'm like doing something totally new that I would have not expected that I was gonna do.
If I don't have an idea, or if I'm like, not feeling it, I stretch canvases.
You gotta steal. You gotta steal from other artists, and then but you put your own self into it, and then it becomes yours. So steal it.
Don't you feel like when we started, because we started around the same time, I feel like if you look like somebody else's stuff, you get called out.
Yeah.
But now, if you don't look like somebody else's stuff,
That's true.
No, that is definitely
I don't care.
for sure.
My stuff is my stuff, and if it looks like someone else's, it's because I stole it from them. And now it's mine.
Man.
Genius. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.